My husband Damien turned me into a universally condemned homewrecker. With just one sentence during an interview, I left Serafina for 10 years. When I was blinded, stripped naked, and pushed off a high rise by an extreme fan of my best friend Serafina, Damien was entangled in red silk with her. Lost in intimacy. Upon hearing of my death, Serafina's eyes turned red, and Damien pulled her into his arms tenderly, saying, "She brought this on herself." But when I woke up it was all just a nightmare. I had been reborn. Right back to the day Damien confessed to me. This life. I will make sure Damien and Serafina are left with nothing, not even a grave to rest in. I had always believed I came from a happy, loving family. As an only child, my parents doted on me endlessly. Later, I met Damien, a man from a similarly prestigious family. He pursued me actively and confessed his love. I agreed, and both our families were pleased. After a period of dating, we got engaged. I became Mrs. Damien the moment I graduated. And with my father's unwavering support, Damien rose quickly to become a promising young entrepreneur. But in Damien's eyes, all of that was just me using my family's influence to force him into marriage, forcing Serafina, his childhood sweetheart and unattainable first love, into the entertainment industry. Compared to her, I wasn't even worth a drop of mosquito blood. Because from the start, Damien had only ever been using me. My father suffered a cerebral hemorrhage from the anger Damien caused. While I was keeping vigil at his bedside, Damien and Serafina attended a charity gala hand in hand. The media praised them as a golden couple. A tragic love story. Star-crossed lovers. Everyone turned a blind eye. No one cared that Damien had been the one to pursue me. That he'd confessed to me in front of everyone. I became the notorious homewrecker. My father's company's stock plummeted due to his death and my scandal. When I questioned Damien, he coldly replied that I was merely a tool to provoke Serafina. If she had just admitted she loved him from the start, he would never have gotten involved with me or made her sad. Their crazed fans believed I refused to divorce him and cornered me on the roof of my office building. As they screamed and beat me, I tried to explain that Damien was the one draining me dry. That he was the one who wouldn't let go. Enraged, the fans tore my clothes and pushed me off the rooftop. In the moment I fell. What I hated most wasn't just Damien and Serafina treating me like a pawn in their love game, it was myself, for dragging my father down with me. I stumbled back from the nightmare of that fall, completely out of control. Looking around, I realized I was standing in front of a heart-shaped string of burning candles. Inside that circle, Damien was reaching out to pull me in. When I saw his face clearly, I instinctively stepped even farther back. The gentle smile on his face froze. And he called my name. Confused. I had been reborn to the day Damien confessed his love to me beneath the girls' dormitory. The area was surrounded by students. The dorm windows above were packed with curious onlookers whispering, "Isn't Damien Serafina's boyfriend?" "Yeah. Childhood sweethearts. Right? Did Damien fall for someone else? Or did Evangeline steal her roommate's boyfriend? It must be Evangeline. What a shameless move. Stealing her best friend's man." I heard these doubts clearly in my past life. But I brushed them off with arrogance because Damien had already hinted at his feelings before the confession. I had asked my roommate and best friend Serafina directly. And she told me herself that she saw Damien as a brother. Nothing more. So I accepted his confession with the pride of someone who thought she alone knew the truth, never noticing the betrayed, tearful expression on Serafina's face behind me. I also failed to see the strange mixture of satisfaction and heartache in Damien's eyes, pleased by Serafina's reaction, yet pained by her tears. Looking again into Damien's deep eyes that always seemed full of false tenderness, I stepped back once more, placing myself behind Serafina. Ignoring her stunned expression, I shoved her forward. She stumbled into Damien's arms, and he instinctively reached out to steady her. This time, I refused to be a piece in their twisted love game. "Damien, did you say the wrong name?" I asked, feigning a scolding tone. "You've scared Serafina to tears. Don't drag me into your little couple's prank." When Damien saw Serafina's eyes brimming with tears, he regretted everything. Given the out I'd offered him, he took the chance to turn the moment around. He dropped to one knee before Serafina, holding up a bouquet of roses and confessing his love to her with trembling sincerity. The crowd gasped in amazement at the unexpected shift. Flowers, candles, a handsome man and a beautiful woman. It was a picture-perfect moment. Phones were raised to capture the scene. Taking a deep breath, I used every ounce of passion in my lungs and led the chant, "Say yes. Say yes. Be together." With my lead, everyone joined in. Students who had already heard about their story, whether rumor or truth, chanted enthusiastically. The shouting was so loud it shook the dorm walls, it sounded like an earthquake. No one noticed Serafina clutching the hem of her shirt and knees, crumpling the fabric into a mess. She lowered her head. Only Damien, still on one knee, could see the emotions on her face, pride, panic, and embarrassment flickering across her features, but not the love or gratitude he had expected. Realizing the situation was slipping from his control, Damien tried to stop the farce. But I had no intention of letting him off the hook. Right on cue, the school broadcast system played "The Moon Represents My Heart" song I had requested on his behalf. Through the speakers came, "Damien would like to dedicate this song to Serafina. He wants to say, Xiao Yi, will you be my girlfriend?" The crowd erupted into excited howls. The atmosphere hit a fever pitch. Serafina enjoyed being the center of attention, but not like this. Not as a reluctant performer on a forced stage. She instinctively tried to back away, inching slowly in retreat. But the stage was already set. I wouldn't let the stars flee the show. I led the chant again, "Say yes," while pulling people closer to tighten the circle. People naturally follow a crowd, and the wave of phone cameras moved in. There was no way for Serafina to escape. "I'm sorry, Damien. You're a good person, but we're not right for each other." When Serafina finally said those words, I almost laughed out loud. I had known all along she would never say yes to Damien. The humiliated, stunned look on Damien's face was the most satisfying thing I'd seen in ages. I made a mental note to track down a classmate later and get a copy of the video, something I could watch again and again for fun. The noisy girls' dormitory suddenly fell silent. Serafina's answer had taken everyone by surprise. They had all witnessed the ambiguous tension and sweetness between Damien and Serafina. So now, they looked at one another in confusion, unable to understand what was going on. "All right, Evangeline. I've already confessed to Serafina just like you wanted. Now will you accept my confession?" Damien quickly wiped any unpleasantness from his face. His pride wouldn't allow him to be seen as a joke. "Sorry, Serafina. Evangeline insisted on doing it this way." Damien sighed dramatically, putting on the look of a nobleman being forced into something against his will. I was utterly disgusted. Even if Damien didn't fully understand why Serafina had rejected him, he still instinctively wanted to protect her. But he had no right to keep using me as a pawn. The condemning stares from our classmates were practically tangible, weaving a tight net around me. I sneered and asked Damien coldly, "Are you playing some kind of game, Evangeline?" Damien stepped forward to grab me, while behind him, Serafina suddenly put on a face of deep humiliation, like she was the true victim here. I walked straight toward Damien, avoiding the hand holding the massive bouquet of roses. As I passed him, I sarcastically wondered aloud if holding such a large bouquet could help him train his biceps. Then I stepped over to the heart-shaped ring of candles, some already extinguished, their wax having melted into messy streaks on the ground. I picked up the loudspeaker and turned it on. "Damien, if you insist this is a confession to me, then I suppose I owe you an answer." "I refuse. I don't think you're a good person." Gasps erupted all around. I didn't need to look to know my classmates were frantically messaging each other, spreading the gossip like wildfire. The school heartthrob, Damien, had confessed to 2 girls with the same bouquet in one day, and both had rejected him. From that moment on, Damien was no longer the golden boy. When people mentioned him, it was with subtle glances. His new nickname? Clown Prince. Devastated and unable to maintain his usual grace, Damien had to be dragged away by his dorm mates. I watched them leave and silently vowed, this was only the beginning. Serafina, unwilling to let me leave, grabbed my hand and accused me. "Evangeline, I told you I only have a sibling-like relationship with Damien. Why did you have to drag me into this? Students who had started to leave now quickly circled back around. I resisted the urge to laugh. They were clearly thinking, more drama? Count me in. I looked Serafina in the eyes. Having dealt with Damien the drama king, I had almost forgotten about this drama queen. I mimicked Serafina's favorite innocent tone and said loudly, "You did tell me that. But I thought you were just afraid Damien's dad would find out. After all, he'd never approve of your relationship." When Damien suddenly confessed, I thought he must have convinced his dad, especially considering your background. I didn't even finish my sentence before Serafina hurriedly interrupted. "I got it. Evangeline. I don't blame you. Let's go." She tried to pull me back to the dorm. I knew she was afraid I'd expose her lies in front of everyone. So I deliberately covered my mouth and asked in a voice loud enough for the whole hallway to hear, "Serafina, did you reject Damien because you like your number one gifter instead?" The gossip kept coming like waves. While people were still wondering why Damien's wealthy family wouldn't accept a rich heiress like Serafina, another bombshell dropped. If this kept up, the students might as well start calling me the Queen of Tea. Serafina had been marketing herself as a rich heiress and had even become a minor internet celebrity. Damien was always her number to support her, not because he was poor, but because someone was always ahead of him. In our past life, Serafina often used this mysterious top supporter to make Damien jealous. But that top supporter was actually a fake account hired by her and her agency. I knew the truth. Serafina was just the daughter of Damien's nanny. Damien had lost his mother young, and his dad was always flying around the world. The nanny and Serafina were his only companions during those lonely years. At first, I'd been stupid enough to be grateful to Serafina. I even helped her keep up the charade, buying her cars, a house, designer bags. After each gift, she would thank me in front of Damien, and he would express his appreciation too. But in Damien's eyes, all of this was humiliation, me using money to belittle Serafina. In the end, I had only moved myself with my kindness. Looking back, I deserved to be called a fool in my past life. Serafina never dared accept Damien's love outright, because she was always more clear-headed than him. She knew Damien's family would never accept the daughter of a nanny. So she dangled herself in front of him like a carrot on a stick, waiting for the day he took full control of the family. Then she could proudly step into the role of his first love and legitimate partner. I had seen Serafina's patience firsthand. But in this life, I was determined to shatter every plan she made. Fueled by my financial power and human beings' insatiable hunger for gossip, rumors of Serafina falling for a wealthy top gifter spread like wildfire the next day. Some questioned how a real heiress could be swayed by money, but others believed it, especially Damien. To him, this was like a drowning man grabbing onto a life raft. Serafina's rejection suddenly made sense. "Damn it. Serafina actually," Damien muttered while touching his hair, imagining it turning green with jealousy. No, no, no. It must have been some smooth-talking guy tricking her. Just the thought of Serafina's delicate face made him soften again. But the temperamental young master needed a target for his frustration. The most hateful one is still Evangeline. She turned everything into a joke. "You just wait. Evangeline. I'll make you pay." The memory of me holding a loudspeaker and rejecting him gnawed at him. "I'll make you fall madly in love with me. Give me everything, and then I'll crush you in front of everyone." Meanwhile, Serafina remained oblivious to Damien's growing suspicion. She had long grown used to his blind loyalty. She was too busy maintaining her collapsing heiress persona. "Did you hear? That Serafina who gets picked up in luxury cars every day? She's just an Annie's daughter." The students huddled together, whispering excitedly. "So that's why Damien's family would never accept her. Oh my God, does Damien even know? Why did he confess to 2 girls in one day? Obviously to create a diversion. Like in palace dramas, where the emperor gives his true love a target to draw all the fire away. So disgusting." When Serafina first heard those words, she trembled all over in fear. Hiding in a corner, her hands were clenched tightly into fists. Her heartbeat pounding like a war drum, a constant reminder that her identity could be exposed at any moment. "No. I have to think of something." A fierce glint flashed in Serafina's eyes. She blamed Evangeline for not only disrupting her plans, but nearly exposing her in public. Once this all dies down, I will make her pay. After racking her brain for a long time, Serafina came up with a plan. He invited all the girls from the same dorm building for a holiday retreat at a villa. Such a grand gesture immediately silenced the rumors. And soon a group of flattering friends gathered around her once again. Like ancient eunuchs trying to curry favor with an emperor, they began to compare me and Serafina, calling me petty, gossip-prone, and even speculating that my family background was inferior to hers. They painted me as a desperate clown trying to compete with Serafina, completely unaware that the true clown was the master they served. I didn't tear off Serafina's mask just yet. Instead, I played along with her on the surface while studying hard in private to make up for the years of education I'd missed after graduating. In my previous life, I gave up taking the qualification exams just to convince my father to approve my relationship with Damien. As a result, Damien secured a full scholarship abroad with the top score, while I stayed behind. This time, I won't concede anything. A scholarship is a world apart from buying a diploma. What belongs to me will reclaim, one piece at a time. Serafina, thinking Damien would come to her side once again, was stunned when she found herself standing alone outside the school gate. The luxury car that usually arrived early was nowhere to be seen. Students whispered as they passed her. Forcing a smile, she explained that the car had broken down and needed repairs. Standing in the scorching sun for a long while, Serafina finally realized Damien was genuinely angry. She reached for her phone to apologize but stopped just as her finger touched the screen. No, she couldn't do that. The luxury car and villa had always been Damien's initiative. If she apologized, wouldn't that make it obvious she was only clinging to him for material gain? She put down her phone. She had to come up with a better plan. In the end, it was me who solved her dilemma. The higher someone climbs, the harder they fall. Wear a mask long enough, and tearing it off will rip the skin beneath. You've been standing at the school gate for so long. Want to change clothes? I asked as Serafina instructed the villa's housekeeper to prepare drinks and desserts. The villa, nestled at the foot of a mountain in the suburbs, offered a scenic view from the window. In the past, Serafina adored this place, practically living here 4 or 5 years while she and Damien carried on. If Serafina wants to change, she can go by herself. It's not like it's your villa. A sycophantic follower chimed in, accidentally stepping on a landmine. Serafina stiffly smiled and pulled me upstairs. Thank you, Evangeline, she said with a pitiful expression. I didn't expect Damien to treat me like this just because I rejected his confession. Thank goodness for you. Honestly, having fulfilled my accept, I think Damien likes you. Don't you feel anything for him? Do you have to ask if I like a pile of shit? I rolled my eyes and opened the wardrobe. Serafina was momentarily stunned. Her next words caught in her throat. Her carefully maintained man was nothing but a pile of crap in my eyes. After I changed clothes, I opened a drawer containing carefully selected jewelry pieces, my Pandora's box, prepared especially for Serafina. As expected, Serafina's eyes immediately locked onto a crystal box containing an emerald and diamond brooch. The pristine platinum base was elegant and refined, with a perfectly cut oval emerald in the center. Its deep green hue resembled a bottomless spring, surrounded by a circle of brilliant cut diamond and that maximized the refraction of light. The dazzling sparkle of the diamonds only enhanced the unmatched grandeur of the emerald. It was so beautiful, it was almost impossible to look away. Knowing she was completely taken with the brooch, I casually added fuel to the fire. You can use any of the jewelry in these drawers. Serafina's eyes lit up as she reached for the crystal box. I added, slow and deliberate. Except for that brooch. That one's a gift from my favorite live streamer. Live streamer? Serafina's gaze turned predatory. Like a beast whose territory had been invaded, she hissed. Who? Feigning ignorance, I opened the crystal box, letting her fully take in the emerald's brilliance. It's custom made for Clarissa. Serafina let out a shrill screech. Clarissa? Her breakdown was entirely within my expectations. Clarissa was the top star in the live stream world. Also known for her wealthy heiress persona, one Serafina had long envied and imitated without ever succeeding. But Clarissa wasn't just a tool to provoke Serafina. That brooch truly was custom made for her. In my past life, when Damien and Serafina framed me as the other woman, Clarissa publicly called Serafina out in front of the media, saying she was manipulative enough to turn the real wife into a mistress. Even if she only did it to spite Serafina, I never forgot the favor. The mention of Clarissa snapped Serafina into full combat mode. She suddenly remembered I was the patron, clinging to my arm and trying to act cute, hoping I would change my mind. Swallowing the bile rising in my throat, I pulled away and returned the box to its place. I'm not being stingy. Clarissa's going to wear this brooch to the live stream gala. Serafina, didn't you say you're not going? My words stabbed her like a dagger. She was a small-time influencer nowhere near qualified to attend such a high-profile event, no matter how badly she wanted to. This kind of major showcase for top streamers was out of her reach. When you're qualified to go in the future, let Damien make it up to you, maybe he'll give you something even better to apologize for how he treated you today. I turned to leave. Serafina followed silently, head lowered in thought. In the previous life, Serafina did end up attending that gala. Damien, out of guilt for using me to provoke her, helped her get in. Whether she manages it this time, I believe in her cunning even more than Damien's stupidity. Sure enough, after the party was over and everyone had left, I was satisfied to hear the bodyguard report, the brooch is missing. Serafina had acted quickly. I always knew Damien would be sweet-talked back to her side eventually, but I didn't expect her to be so ruthless. People willing to take risks often reap the sweetest rewards. In a way, I lost in the past life fair and square. Serafina even informed Damien's family matriarch through her own mother that Damien had confessed to her. When the family head, who was abroad at the time, heard that Damien liked the housekeeper's daughter, her heart seized up. Fortunately, having fulfilledly, Serafina had the presence of mind to say she rejected him. The housekeeper disapproved of Serafina's reckless plan. But Serafina silenced her with a single sentence, "You might lose your job, but I'm gaining the chance to become Damien's wife one day." And things unfolded just as Serafina predicted. In recognition of the housekeeper's years of service and for proactively reporting the matter, Damien asked his secretary to give her a generous severance package. Little did he know that what he saw as an act of kindness was actually Serafina's trap, one that would deepen his resentment toward his father. "Damien, do you understand now why Serafina couldn't say yes to you?" When Damien heard the news and went looking for Serafina, he found her sitting on the lawn beside the airport terminal, their childhood secret base, staring at planes as they soared into the clouds, like a lonely change yearning to fly away. The scene was so melancholy it could break one's heart. "I'm sorry, Serafina." Damien wrapped his arms around the fragile girl like she was made of glass. He hadn't expected his father to be so heartless as to tear them apart. "I didn't think this through." "No, Damien, why? Don't apologize." Serafina, like a startled rabbit, looked up with red eyes, exposing her pale neck and delicate features. "No matter what Damien does, Serafina will never blame him. You don't know. At the time. Her voice choked, and her final words came in a tearful whisper right against Damien's ear. "I wanted so badly to say yes to be your girlfriend, to stay by your side for a lifetime." Damien held Serafina tightly and solemnly promised, "I'll bring you and Auntie back." "No." Serafina shrank into Damien's embrace, her head tucked into his shoulder as she shook it. "Don't fight with your father because of me. I'm not worth it." Damien's breath hitched at the moist heat of her breath against his shoulder. He took a deep breath to calm himself and said, "Serafina, you are the most important. Anyone who tries to stop us, I won't spare her. If only I could be as free as those birds and fly to you forever." Serafina pulled away from his embrace and gazed up at another passing plane. The groundwork had been laid, it was time to cast the net. If it were Evangeline, Damien's father wouldn't oppose it. Serafina's voice was full of sorrow. "If only I were as accomplished as Evangeline. If only I could become a superstar. Maybe Damien's father would see me differently. But no matter how many lies I've told, no matter how hard I've worked, I'm just a failure who couldn't even make it to the night of live streaming." Her tears finally fell onto the grass and onto Damien's heart. I was curled up in my custom plush doll-shaped sofa, its softness like baby skin. Scattered across the cushions were practice exams, each one marked with red check marks that made the father who had just wheeled in the live stream screen beam with pride. I heard you asked to be reminded to watch it. Want to go in person? There's still time, he asked and declined. No need. This event isn't worth much of my time, I replied, sitting up and reaching for a new test paper. I was watching the live stream for one reason only, to confirm something. It didn't take long. Following a few top streamers down the red carpet, Serafina appeared, stepping into the camera frame ahead of many other internet personalities. Under the spotlight, Serafina was like the brightest star in the night sky. Slowly coming into view, she wore a stunning, tailored haute couture gown that shimmered with every movement. A hem of her dress rippled like waves lapping the shore, or petals dancing in the wind. Her hair was elegantly styled into a bun, with a few artfully loose strands adding a touch of wild beauty. Most eye-catching of all was the emerald brooch pinned to her dress, brilliant and dazzling, the finishing touch to her look. I closed the live stream with satisfaction and called Clarissa. Proceed as planned. Soon after, Serafina made her entrance. The internet exploded, but not in the way she had hoped. Clarissa and Serafina wearing the same brooch. Clarissa said the brooch was one of a kind. Who's lying? Live streaming gala, who's the real heiress? That one brooch threw both Clarissa and Serafina into the spotlight. Earlier, Clarissa had been interviewed on the red carpet, claiming the brooch was a gift from her best friend and the only one of its kind. Now that a second brooch had appeared, people were speculating either Clarissa had lied, or Serafina was wearing a fake. Fans from both sides began an all-out war, with Clarissa and me intentionally fanning the flames. Serafina's fan base went into overdrive. Before the livestream gala was even over, videos of Serafina being chauffeured in luxury cars and using designer goods were circulating everywhere. Anyone who opened social media could see her elite heiress lifestyle. But if she was a rich heiress, then whose daughter was she exactly? More and more people started asking that question. Then a sharp-eyed reporter noticed that one of Serafina's handbags had been a one-of-a-kind design originally commissioned by Damien's mother, and seen at a charity gala. Rumors quickly spread that Serafina was the daughter of the Damien family. At that point, Damien and Serafina were still hoping to quietly manage the situation. But the speed at which information spreads online caught them completely off guard. A video of Serafina calling Damien big brother at school was released alongside the fact that the Damien family had only one son. With some subtle guidance on my part, the rumor that Serafina was the Damien family's illegitimate daughter spread like wildfire. Just as Damien was trying to prevent the Damien group from issuing a clarification, another video went viral of him confessing to Serafina at school. Damien and Serafina became overnight sensations. Damien family incest scandal. The love affair between the legitimate son and the maid's daughter. Love and hate in high society, a forbidden romance between identities. Each headline was more scandalous than the last. The head of the Damien family was furious. Stocks plummeted. I happily bought up shares from panicked small investors. Combined with my family's original holdings, the Evangeline Group became one of the largest stakeholders in the Damien Group. Despite Damien's threats, the Damien Group was forced to issue a statement. Serafina's true identity was exposed. Her heiress persona became a public joke, and the internet's backlash was swift. Hackers leaked her private information. She received daily harassment calls. People threw trash and painted graffiti on her residence. Someone even left a funeral wreath on her doorstep. Worst of all, she realized someone had been following her, breaking into her room and stealing her undergarments. At school, Serafina's situation was even worse. Students, with their youthful sense of justice, couldn't stand being deceived. The kinder ones pretended not to see her, treating her like hair. After almost getting hit by a flower pot while being pelted with rotten eggs on the street, Serafina finally broke down. She was diagnosed with depression and applied for a leave of absence from school. During this time, I received multiple calls from Damien. You need to go online and clear things up, say the brooch was a gift from you to Serafina. That the rich girl persona was something you helped her fabricate. You can't just wash your hands of this. Did she pay me? I scoffed. And I didn't get a share of her profits either. Helping her was me being kind, refusing to help is just me being fair. This has nothing to do with me. Lies. Vanity. Phoniness, meanwhile, greed. Pettiness. Malice, none of that came from me. Damien. You're the one mostly responsible for the way she turned out. When I refused to shoulder Serafina's blame, Damien quickly tried to use the same tactics against me. He started sending flowers to my dorm and home non-stop, declared his love on the school broadcast, filmed public confessions, and posted them online, pulling every trick in the book. The media quickly latched onto his antics. And he and Serafina took advantage of the attention to host a live stream. Serafina is just like a sister to me. Evangeline is the one I truly love, Damien said, red-faced, clenching his fist as if he were deeply aggrieved. But Evangeline has always been bothered by Serafina's presence. Serafina only pretended to be a rich heiress because she wanted to be accepted by Evangeline. And honestly, calling her a rich girl isn't that far-fetched. She grew up in my house. Just like family. Then he took a deep breath and continued, eyes gleaming with indignation. I never expected that Evangeline was doing all this just to ruin Serafina. She's a kind and pure-hearted girl who only lied because she had no other choice. These past 2 years, she's been deeply hurt. She even fell into depression. I can't let love blind the public anymore. I have to stand up and tell the truth. This whole thing was orchestrated by Evangeline. She coerced Serafina into the live stream. She spread the rumors. She played everyone. Serafina let out a well-timed, tragic cry like a mammoth sinking helplessly into a swamp. I'm sending Evangeline a lawyer's letter. I hope she can come to her senses. I still love her, Damien concluded, as if he'd just delivered the judgment of God. I nearly vomited last night's dinner from how disgusting it was. People can be sickening, but this? This was inhuman. I raised an eyebrow, listening to Damien's shameless tirade on the live stream, patting my furious father on the shoulder to calm him down. I didn't mind them striking back, frankly. I would have been surprised if they didn't. I laid the trap. There was no way I'd let the prey escape. Before Damien and Serafina could even end the stream, my family's corporation posted a legal statement on our official website, along with a video. The video showed Serafina in the walk-in closet, thanking me personally for lending her the villa, proving I never threatened and or manipulated her. Then came the bombshell. The video showed Serafina checking to make sure no one was around, sneaking into the room, carefully closing the door behind her, entering the closet, and swiftly pocketing the brooch. Serafina, a thief. She immediately rocketed to the top of trending searches again. This time, for 2 whole days. The topped ads were Serafina theft and Serafina Damien slander. The police then released a public statement. The brooch Serafina had taken was a high-quality prototype, but because its value exceeded 3,000 yuan, it counted as a serious theft. Serafina was now facing criminal charges up to 3 years in prison. And the cherry on top? Damien's father, furious at having been manipulated by Serafina and her mother, took her to court for theft as well, this time using the evidence of luxury goods she'd shown off online. In the end, Serafina was sentenced to 10 years in prison as the primary offender. Her mother, as an accomplice, having fulfilled bliss, was sentenced to 1.5 years. In court, Serafina broke down and screamed curses at me. She begged the judge for mercy, snot and tears running down her face as she was dragged away by bailiffs. The once glamorous celebrity of my past life was gone. This was nothing but a wreck. Damien came to hate his father after that. A true hopeless romantic. He even tried to appear in court to testify that the stolen items had all been gifts from him. But Damien's father anticipated this and had already sent him abroad, cutting off all contact. By the time Damien was allowed to return, everything was over. By then, I had already started taking over my family's business. Using the knowledge from my past life, I'd invested in several high-quality projects and quickly became the model child everyone talked about. Meanwhile, Damien became a cautionary tale among our peers. At every social event, when my father and his old business rivals gathered and dominated the room, people would glance at me with a mix of admiration and envy, only to breathe a sigh of relief when they saw Damien. At least their kids weren't the worst. After running into Damien at several bidding events, I realized he had joined the Damien family business over 3 years earlier than he had in my past life. Maybe this version of Damien had wised up earlier and realized that power determined freedom. But to someone like me with a cheat code of past life knowledge, he was just a child lost in the forest. He lost every battle. And I even lured him into investing in several doomed projects. The resulting massive losses gave Damien's father a cerebral hemorrhage and landed him in the hospital. Hello, Uncle Damien. I carried a gift basket and went to visit his father on behalf of my own. Thanks to excellent medical care, Damien's father was slowly recovering. The Damien and my family had been old allies, business partners, since my grandfather's time. In my past life, Damien's father had hoped I would marry into the family, thinking Damien genuinely liked me, and arranged our engagement before I even graduated. But that same seemingly kind elder stood by helplessly when Damien drove my father to his death and took over our business. The corporate world is a battlefield. One moment your allies. The next, your enemies. The Damien family's betrayal was understandable. So my desire to destroy them in this life is, too. As soon as Damien's father saw me, he sighed heavily. Compared to me, Damien looked even more disappointing. I offered him some polite comfort. You know, Uncle, I said with a smile as I arranged the flowers in the vase. I didn't choose to care much about the family business. Honestly, I didn't know what I was doing back then. Then my father started training a few male subordinates. I continued, feigning innocence. I heard he was planning to hand the company over to whichever one became my husband, and let me stay home as a housewife. That gave me such a scare I had no choice but to work hard. Damien's father looked thoughtful. I guess if my dad hadn't done that, I wouldn't be who I am today, I concluded with a smile. After leaving the hospital, I called the newly hired maid at Damien's house. Keep a close eye on the Damien family, I instructed. If Damien makes no move, leak the news about the illegitimate child to him. In my past life, the scandal of the illegitimate child didn't come out until over a year later. Now I realize that Damien probably pushed for our engagement largely because of it. But back then, I was too blind to see the truth, convinced it was all love. Fortunately, I didn't even need to activate the cons I had planted. Damien's illegitimate half-brother was brought back from abroad by their father with great fanfare and given an internship at the company. After making a costly mistake, Damien was demoted and ended up beneath the half-brother in rank. Furious, I seized the opportunity to spread rumors within the company that Damien's father intended to pass on the family business to the illegitimate son. Simultaneously, I sent people to feign allegiance to Damien. The web was tightening. The day Damien would be fully cocooned and it was near. Damien, it really looks like the boss is set on handing the company to that bastard, said one of Damien's subordinates, whom I had already bought off, shaking his head and sighing. Damien pulled out his cigarette case, lit the last one inside, and took a deep drag without saying a word. Since the return of the illegitimate son, Damien had tried to become the model son, even successfully securing a big project with his team. But not long after, the half-brother landed an even bigger deal, as if no matter what Damien did, the bastard could always do better. That perpetual sense of being one step behind was driving Damien insane. Every time he heard his father praise the illegitimate son, he put on a smile. But deep down, he wanted them both dead. Even though the boss hasn't announced anything yet, from the looks of it, it won't be long. You should think about your future, Damien. I'm resigning. It'll be worse to get kicked out once the crown prince takes over. With that, the subordinate walked away with slumped shoulders. Behind him, in the shadows of the hallway, a red light blinked on and off, just like the chaos flickering in Damien's mind. Then, went out a low sorry. A video was sent to my phone. It clearly showed Damien sneaking open his father's briefcase, removing a box of pills, and replacing the contents with identical-looking ones. The moment to close the net had come. I waited eagerly for news of Damien's death, ready to personally escort him to prison where he could be reunited with Serafina. 1 day. 2 days. A week passed, and I received no such news. Instead, I was hit with something unexpected. My planted nanny had been fired. Had Damien really turned over a new leaf? I didn't believe it. But then things happened that forced me to. Not only did Damien turn over a new leaf, he evolved. Sunlight streamed through the towering windows, casting long shadows over the boardroom table. The air was thick with tension. Today was the biggest bidding meeting of the year for X Corporation, a contract worth hundreds of millions. Both the Evangeline family and the Damien family were vying for the prize. Damien and I sat on opposite sides of the table. Everyone else was nervously reviewing their bid materials and presentations. Every detail could be the deciding factor, everyone except Damien. While I anxiously rehearsed my speech, Damien stood at the window, staring down at the pedestrians below. The look in his eyes, aloof and unbothered, sent a chill down my spine. For a moment, I saw the Damien from my previous life. The review panel consisted of X-Corp's top executives. Their stern faces radiated unquestionable authority. The tension in the room was suffocating. I was the first to present. I had confidence. First, I vaguely remembered the Damien family's minimum bid from the previous life. Second, my design proposal was more innovative and promised greater future returns. The panel clearly liked what they saw. Questions came one after another, and I answered each swiftly and precisely. Their expressions softened. The smiles they gave me were genuine. Just as I started to relax, Damien stepped up to deliver his presentation. The moment he began speaking, my heart sank. Unlike the previous timeline, the Damien family now emphasized environmental sustainability. His proposal struck a balance between cost and eco-consciousness, something that immediately caught the panel's attention and made for excellent peer value. Damien was not the same man as before. I should have known the moment I saw that familiar back, the way he never looked at me straight when I visited the Damien estate. My hatred, which had briefly settled after Serafina's arrest, roared back to life. My desire for revenge blazed anew. My hands trembled with rage and anticipation. Only Damien's death would make it all truly complete. My trembling must have been misread. As he stepped down from the stage, Damien did something unthinkable. He walked up to me and whispered in my ear, "I can let you win this bid." Life. Goosebumps broke out over my entire body. In all the times we'd been together, we had never used such affectionate words. Had Damien lost his mind? Was this some new tactic for revenge now that Serafina was imprisoned? In just one shared glance, Damien and I both realized we had been reborn. But if he thought I was destined to lose, he underestimated me gravely. "Ms. Evangeline," one of the reviewers asked, "your company has promised the shortest construction time. Could this compromise safety? Our firm has adopted the world's most advanced construction technology. For this project, we plan to use a newly patented technique." I replied confidently. Damien abruptly sat up straight. The confidence on his face vanished. This patent had belonged to the Damien family in the previous life. At this point in the timeline, it should still be in its experimental phase. But I had found the laboratory, invested in it, and accelerated the research just in time for this bid. Our bid wasn't the lowest, but our cutting-edge technology and projected benefits were undeniable. X Corporation awarded the contract to us. The room erupted in applause. My team members hugged each other in excitement. When one male colleague tried to hug me, Damien suddenly stepped in between us, forcing the guy to retreat awkwardly. I raised an eyebrow at him. "Congratulations, Evangeline," Damien said politely, extending his hand. I didn't accept it. Instead, I brushed past him and went to talk to the panel members. Building relationships with them was far more important. "I thought you'd rush off to see Serafina," I said later, standing on my balcony, a glass of red wine in hand. In the garden below, flowers bloomed wildly. Out of season. Behind me, Damien, who had come to attend the Evangeline family's celebration party, walked over with a glass of juice. Without a word, he swapped it with my wine like he had every right to. I let out a cold snort and set the juice aside. "Anything sent by Damien, I wouldn't dare touch." "Wife, I know you're the one who truly loves me," Damien said dejectedly as he noticed my reaction. "My father has an illegitimate child. Everyone around me is just a sycophant. And Serafina, she's a wretched woman. Only you ever truly cared about me. I regretted everything the moment you jumped off that building." "Really?" His words completely disgusted me, like rancid leftovers trying to make a comeback. At that moment, I was already calculating which corner of the garden would be best for burying Damien alive. What did Serafina do to you? I probed, watching him closely. Did she kill you? Hatred is hard to mask. The pain of betrayal ignited a raging fire in him. From his expression, I realized that Serafina had really killed him in our past life. What's the matter? Without me, your little first love confession spot lost its magic? I was genuinely curious about how this love-crazed fool finally woke up. I gave Serafina a lot of shares and inflated her greed, he said with a dark expression. She set me up in a honey trap, and I was accused of rape. To fight off the old geezers in the company, I pushed her into the spotlight and used her image to stabilize things. She used the Damien family name to connect with powerful people in the capital. In the end, she arranged a car crash that killed me. Then took over the Damien family and married into that world. I was just her first stepping stone. I wasn't surprised. Serafina had always been like an azalea, thriving on the nourishment of others, clawing her way up by any means necessary. My complete lack of emotional response agitated Damien. Maybe he thought I'd cry and hug him, pained by his tragedy, and eventually forgive him so he could once again leech off me. But my indifference shattered that illusion. Wife, I know you're still mad at me, and you should be. He tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. His gaze darkened, but he kept going. I'll keep pursuing you until you forgive me. Now that I knew how Damien died, I had no intention of staying a second longer. I left without hesitation any longer. And I might have killed him in front of everyone. 3 years later, I had already graduated and become the general manager of the Evangeline family enterprise. One day, having fulfilled my essay, I stepped into a nearby employee restroom. I'm so jealous of the GM getting courted by a domineering CEO every day. I don't know why she keeps playing hard to get. It's been 3 years of this public flirting. A woman's voice drifted in from outside. Of course it's because our GM doesn't like Damien. This isn't some romance novel with a swoon-worthy CEO. If anything, have anything. Our GM is the real boss. She got a full scholarship to study abroad. Even Damien couldn't beat her. Another voice replied. What's wrong with Damien? He's expanded his business empire all the way to the capital these past few years. Well, hasn't our GM also brought the Evangeline family to a whole new level? Their equals, neither can dominate the other. And marriage is about one side giving up something. That'll never work between them. Their voices faded. I stepped out of the restroom and looked into the mirror. My short hair was sleek. My makeup flawless. Sharp, clear eyes that looked like they could see through anything. The tailored suit fit me perfectly. I looked powerful, confident. I loved who I had become in this lifetime. Once Damien was dead, I could finally close the book on my past life. On the plane, when I saw Damien, I wasn't surprised. The only strange thing would be if he hadn't placed spies around me. Evangeline, I can't let you win this bid, he said, looking at me with gentle, affectionate eyes like a deep, mysterious pawn that could make anyone believe they were his true love. People nearby started whispering, curious about us. I ignored them. I've never needed you to let me win. This bid was the first major project Damien had led after graduating in our past life. It was the cornerstone of his rise to power in the Damien family. It meant everything to him. We both knew our baselines had changed since our last life. In a battle between two people reborn, past strategies no longer applied. This was the first time we were truly starting on equal footing. The next day, the bidding meeting officially began. In a spacious conference room, a massive projection screen hung on the wall. The long table stood in the center, surrounded by representatives from various companies. I fixed my gaze on the panel of judges sitting at the front. They wore stern expressions and held the scoring sheets that would determine everything. When I looked away, my eyes met Damien's. The fire of competition surged in my chest. I smirked slightly, eyes glinting with anticipation. The panel briefly explained the background and importance of the project before announcing the start of the bidding. Damien presented his proposal first. It was clear his team had prepared meticulously, with compelling data and persuasive arguments designed to sway the judges. After his presentation, silence fell. Only the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional cough broke the stillness. A sheen of sweat glistened on everyone's foreheads. The pressure was suffocating. Damien's plan was nearly flawless. Then came the QA. The judge's questions were sharp and merciless. Each one a blow meant to test Damien's composure and expertise. As time passed, he reached the final phase. Damien gave his closing statement. His voice trembling slightly, but full of determination. He was set on winning this bid. Unlike him, I had chosen to go last. As I delivered my presentation, I noticed Damien's expression darken visibly. He gripped his cup tightly, fingers tapping nervously on the table. I knew he was recalculating, wondering if he should lower his offer. I had prepared for this for 3 years. My proposal was thorough, meticulous, packed with potential. It offered both security and significant profit. The panel furrowed their brows, eyes darting between me and Damien. They were clearly weighing their options carefully. The ticking of the clock echoed loudly in the room. Each second felt stretched to an eternity. Someone tried to steady their breath, but even that sounded loud in the tense atmosphere. After intense deliberation, the panel returned. All eyes locked onto the envelope in their hands. The spokesperson cleared their throat and announced the winner, the Damien family group. Though my proposal was safer, they had opted to take a risk in pursuit of higher returns. My subordinates looked disappointed and dejected, but I stood up and, under everyone's watchful eyes, shook Damien's hand just like he had once done for me, congratulating him on his win. Evangeline, your proposal was excellent. But you have to understand, every company has a different core philosophy. This company is known for taking risks, Damien said as he pulled me closer while shaking my hand, whispering into my ear. His deep, masculine voice tickled my ear. I pulled away from his embrace and met his gaze directly. One victory means nothing. Winning consistently, that's what truly matters. Flower petals on the ground, flickering candlelight, familiar faces and a familiar setting. I rubbed my temples. Had recent successes made Damien overconfident? He actually dared to confess to me again. Evangeline, marry me, Damien said, getting down on one knee, holding out a diamond ring with a sincere expression. My breath hitched. Seriously? No confession? Just straight into the grave? I know my foolishness hurt you deeply. It wasn't until tragedy struck that I realized I've only ever loved you, Damien said emotionally. I've chased your shadow through our home, the company, having fulfilled my desire, even our school. It's been painful and maddening, this desperate love soaked in despair. You could never imagine how much I hated myself. You were the one who loved me most in this world, and I let you slip away. My despair was worse than death. Please, my love, let's leave the past behind and start anew. Nothing stands in our way anymore. You're wrong, Damien. There is one obstacle between us. I sneered. It's that waddle-godding, tofu-brained head of yours that's so mushy it can't even hold logic. With that, I kicked the kneeling Damien to the ground and walked away without a second glance. We're just letting him off like that? My secretary asked. She had once been one of Damien's subordinates. You think Damien has time to do anything else now? I didn't even look back at Damien's dramatic act as I got into the car. The project Damien Group just secured is going to blow up. No way. My secretary gasped in disbelief. They did background checks for over half a year and found nothing. That project had indeed earned Damien fame and massive profits in our past life. But the moment I realized Damien had been reborn too, I began planning my counterattack. I knew he'd try to win the same bid again. 3 years of preparation had allowed me to gather all the evidence. Once the Damien family invested their large sum into that black hole, I would be ready to crush the cake flat with one blow. Just as I expected. Within a month, problems with the project began to surface one after another. The media swarmed, and Damien Group's funds were sucked into a bottomless pit. But if they broke the contract, the damages would be catastrophic. Damien's father, despite his illness, desperately tried to secure new investment. But once the Damien family's cash flow was severed, they would collapse like a giant losing its spine. After being rejected by my father, Damien's father finally succumbed to rage and died of a stroke. Damien tried to see me multiple times. but my secretary always turned him away with a polite smile. I had the patience to wait for the sweetest fruit. Once I confirmed that Damien had poured all their investment into the doomed project, I released evidence of the bidding company's corruption. Their stock price plummeted. Damien's entire investment vanished. The financial chain broke. And eventually, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. They declared bankruptcy. But the first person to kick Damien while he was down wasn't me, it was Serafina from prison. She revealed Damien as the true mastermind behind the embezzlement scandal. Backed by a trove of WeChat chat logs. I knew she had taken the fall for him in hopes of marrying into the Damien family. But now that it was gone, her only hope of a reduced sentence was to betray him. Damien was sentenced to 10 years in prison. When I visited him in the detention center, he looked disheveled and broken. His unkempt beard covered his gaunt face. And fresh bruises marked his skin. "Wife. Do you really not want me anymore?" Damien murmured into the phone. Head hanging like an abandoned dog. I couldn't help but laugh. "You really think Serafina just happened to hear about your situation in prison? It was you." Damien looked at me in disbelief. Like I was some sort of monster. "Evangeline. Did you forget what you promised me outside the dorm? That you'd be with me forever? We fought side by side against the illegitimate child. Took over the Damien family together. All those years of love, how could you forget it all?" I didn't forget. My voice was calm. Like one who had seen all storms and survived. "That's why it's all the more unforgivable. But now, seeing you like this, I can rest easy." I hung up the phone without looking back, ignoring Damien's cries. Damien tried to lunge at me. But the glass wall stopped him. Guards tackled him, pinning his arms behind his back. His face hit the concrete floor, eating a mouthful of dust. "Still," he screamed defiantly. "Just you wait. I'll make you and Serafina pay with your lives." And next time I saw news about Damien, it was on TV. He had killed himself in prison by smashing his head against the wall. I took the remote from my father's hand and calmly changed the channel. A reborn man, given 10 years, could have easily risen again. From the start, I never intended for Damien to leave prison alive. My father sighed a few times but didn't dwell on Damien. In this life, they had barely interacted. Damien never got the chance to hurt him. That's a relief my father was still alive and healthy. When Damien had just won the project, I sold all my stocks and walked away with a fortune. With that money, I established a charity dedicated to helping divorced or soon-to-be divorced women find jobs. I also started a company that prioritized hiring moms. Too many women ruined their lives over momentary, obsessive love. I wanted to give them, just like myself, a chance to rise again from the ashes. In the 7th year of my marriage to Vernon, he became paralyzed while trying to save a drowning woman. I took care of him in bed, looked after his elderly parents, and raised our daughter for a full 20 years. On my deathbed, I saw the woman he had saved again. She was as beautiful and charming as she had been back then. However, the young man by her side bore a striking 9-point resemblance to Vernon. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in the year when Vernon became paralyzed. When I watched as Vernon pushed his wheelchair and left the courtyard alone. Today was my birthday. Ever since he became paralyzed, he would go out alone and stay away for a long time on this day every year. He said that on this day each year, he would repent for his impulsive decision to jump into the sea and save that poor woman, which had left him paralyzed and a burden to me. I was both sad and touched. And then I comforted him with tears in my eyes. "You are the bravest man I've ever met. Don't forget, I'm the wife of a hero." That's how the media reported about me back then. Glorious, great, selfless, and unyielding. All of that belonged to my previous life. To the woman who had been imprisoned by life and worn down by it for a lifetime. I put down the potato in my hand and silently followed Vernon. He pushed his wheelchair with some difficulty along the gravel path, and then walked carefully along the very edge of the road. From time to time, kind-hearted people who recognized him would come up and ask if he needed help. He would smile and refuse their offer with pride and modesty. He didn't notice me following behind. He kept moving forward without stopping, showing some signs of anxiety. The wheelchair entered a park. I looked around and felt a sense of familiarity. but I couldn't remember when I had been here before. It wasn't until Vernon hid behind a thick pine tree, and then cautiously poked his head out to look towards the crapple tree over there. I had loved crapple flowers the most before he had his accident. When we were dating, every year when the crapple flowers bloomed, we would go for a walk in the park. We were very poor at that time and could only borrow the public flowers to create a bit of romance. But at this moment, there was a strange pain in my heart. It wasn't until the woman in a white dress under the crapple tree stood up and I saw her face clearly. She was the woman Vernon had saved. The woman who had almost cost Vernon his life. She supported her bulging belly with one hand and walked forward weakly. As she walked, she suddenly turned around and looked in Vernon's direction. Their eyes met, and her tears instantly streamed down her face. She stumbled over and fell to her knees in front of Vernon, pressing her face against his palm. Vernon's tears also flowed down, and he reached out his hand to gently stroke her face. He called her softly, "Silly Claire. Why are you crying?" Her name was Claire. She had divorced last year, and her ex-husband was a gambler. "I thought you wouldn't come to see me again." Just because of this sentence, Vernon's eyes became even redder, and he almost choked up. "How could I bear not to see you? I'm just afraid of burdening you and our child." I felt as if my soul had been drained by these words, and I slumped down behind the flower bushes. Scenes from my previous life flashed through my mind like a movie. A woman was arguing with the vendor over a few dollars. A woman was pushing a bicycle in a shabby coat to pick up her daughter from school in the heavy snow. A woman in her 30s already had wrinkles all over her face as she pleaded with the government for more subsidies. Finally, having fulfilled my sigh, the image froze on the moment when she was on her deathbed, and a beautiful woman in a red dress walked up to Vernon. The young man beside her bore an in-point resemblance to the young Vernon. The woman finally took her last breath and ended her life. I covered my mouth, afraid that my sobs would startle that infatuated couple. He said he was afraid of burdening Claire. But what about my whole life? He said he was afraid of burdening their child. But what about our daughter? I scrambled back home. There was a musty smell in the house. And our daughter Annie was sitting at the table, doing her homework seriously. When she saw me come in, she rushed to my side. She held a test paper with a full score in her hand. And then, with a look of guilt in her eyes, she took out another test paper with a score of 98 and apologized to me. "I got white row or false question wrong. I'm sorry, Mom. I won't make the same mistake next time." The pain in my heart intensified, and I couldn't say a word. I just hugged her tightly in my arms. "Mom, don't cry. I'll work hard. I'll get into a good university, earn a lot of money to treat Dad's illness, and I won't let you suffer anymore." I remembered how strict I had been with her in my previous life. Knowing that I would be consumed by daily chores for the rest of my life, I pinned all my hopes on my only daughter. I hoped she would strive for success, be promising and wealthy in the future, and at least in terms of my child, I could experience the pride of a woman. At least, I could have one thing to be proud of. Later, Annie really got into the best university, but she developed severe depression before she was even 20. She tried to commit suicide several times and would have an emotional breakdown whenever she saw me. I didn't dare to see her for a full 10 years. Until the moment I took my last breath. I still hadn't been able to see Annie for the last time. I'm sorry. I should have said this to her in my previous life. Happy birthday, Mom. She reached out and stroked my hair to soothe me. When Vernon came back, it was already evening. When he saw me, he placed a bunch of crapple flowers in my hand and gently held my hand. "I thought I could give you a better life, but I made you suffer so much." I lowered my head and looked into his eyes. The light in the room was dim, and I seemed to be back in that cold night. I was standing in the bone-chilling sea water. It was the 7th day after my parents passed away. I was only 16 years old, and in an instant, it felt like the whole world had been reduced to just me. I wanted to follow my parents and lead this world. Just as the water was about to submerge my head, a pair of strong hands grabbed my waist and dragged me up, desperately pulling me towards the shore. When I came to my senses, I only saw a familiar face. He looked at me furiously and scolded me for being a coward who didn't even have the courage to leave. He was Vernon. My classmate. Before that night. We were just classmates. And we had probably only said 1 or 2 words to each other. He had always been like that. Loyal and warm-hearted. I liked him for that. So, when he was lying in the hospital after saving Claire, although I was angry with him, it seemed that I had already expected something like this. He had always stood up for strangers, gotten into many fights, and suffered a lot of injuries. I loved his kind heart, Dennis. But I was also worried about him. The crapple flowers are really beautiful. I turned my eyes away. His eyes were no different from before. But now I felt disgusted when I looked at them. When did he start being with Claire? Was Claire's divorce related to him? Why were they both at the beach at the same time? When? Did he change? I didn't notice it at all. Before he came back, these questions had been swirling in my mind. Every time I thought about them, my heart ached. Vernon chuckled. Then I'll go and pick some more for you tomorrow. I nodded and smiled. Okay. The next afternoon, he indeed pushed his wheelchair out again. I still followed him quietly. But this time, I took my phone with me. The two of them sat quietly under the crapple tree. If you ignored the wheelchair, they really made a good couple. I thought of my previous life again. Of Claire's red dress when I was on my deathbed. She was a year older than me, but she was so beautiful. As for me, since Vernon had his accident, I had never worn a dress or applied lipstick again. I had aged so quickly that I didn't even have time to choose a suitable dress. I dried my tears with the back of my hand and took a few photos with my phone. In the photos, the man gently tucked the stray hair beside his beloved woman's temple with a tender look in his eyes. On the way back, I took out the photos and looked at them from time to time. In fact, when Vernon and I were dating, we also took a lot of photos. He had looked at me with the same deep affection. I had never doubted his sincerity towards me in the past, but now, his feelings had changed. When we got back, Annie had just finished school, and I picked her up and we went home together. Is there anything you want to eat? Mom will buy it for you. She looked at the fried cakes beside her, swallowed, and shook her head. No. I want to eat the food you cook, Mom. My nose twitched with sadness. I walked over and bought the fried cakes and put them in her hand. If you want to eat anything in the future, just tell Mom, and I'll buy it for you. Annie stopped what she was doing and stared at me without moving. After a while, she immediately said as if making a vow, I will definitely get a full score next time. Mom, you have to believe me. My eyes were dry and painful. I stroked her hair. You don't have to get a full score. Mom just wants you to be happy and healthy. She blinked and then nodded doubtfully. On the way back, Annie suddenly asked me, is the money that Uncle borrowed from our family never going to be paid back? I stopped in my tracks. She was talking about the 100 yuan that Vernon had lent to a friend a year ago. Later, when he was lying in the hospital waiting for the money to save his life, I asked him to tell me who that friend was so that I could get the money back. But he said that the friend had already died, leaving behind only a disabled old mother. And he asked me not to disturb the old woman. Otherwise he would rather not receive treatment. A certain image flashed through my mind, and my heart suddenly started beating faster. When we got home, Vernon hadn't come back yet. I quickly rummaged through and found the newspaper that had reported on Vernon's heroic act of saving someone. There was an interview with Claire on the back of the newspaper. She said that she had divorced in February last year. February last year was exactly the month when Vernon lent out the money. Wasn't it? 3. Did Vernon give Claire 100 yuan? He would rather die than get the money back. And I, in order to pay for his surgery, had borrowed money from all my relatives on my mother's side. I had even been on the verge of kneeling down to the doctor, begging him to save Vernon. I bit the back of my hand. My teeth sank into my skin, and blood slowly seeped out. The pain in my heart eased a bit, and it also made me more clear-headed. I want a divorce. I want them to pay the price. Vernon had been immersed in sweet dates with Claire these past few days. With 2 women being loyal to him even though he was disabled, he must be feeling very proud, right? And I went to inquire about the reason for Claire's divorce. Her ex-husband was a gambler and a domestic abuser. Claire had filed for divorce several times. But the other party refused and even gave her a severe beating in return. So why did he agree to the divorce so readily this time? I went to the Mojhorn parlor and found Claire's ex-husband, Jack. He had lost 800 yuan but didn't have the money to pay. So he was pinned to the ground and beaten. I'll pay for him. Several men leered at me with lascivious eyes and snickered. Not bad, Jack. You've hooked up with another one so soon? Was it this woman who gave you the 100 yuan back then? Jack put down his hand that was covering his head and looked at me in confusion. I quickly paid the 800 yuan and grabbed Jack's hand, pulling him out. I know you. You're the wife of the hero. What do you want from me? Didn't Vernon give you 100 yuan? He asked me to get the money back. He spat on the ground and said, What did you say? Get the money back? Doesn't he want those photos anymore? Sure enough. Jack must have something in his hands that made Vernon have to give him the money. What photos? He took out his phone and flipped through the pictures one by one for me to see. Vernon and Claire were lying naked in bed, hastily pulling the quilt over their bodies in fear. But their faces were clearly captured in the photos. I'll buy this one. His hand stopped, and he frowned and glared at me. Were you bluffing me just now? Fine. Is this the only one? He rolled his eyes. It's 10 yuan. 1 yuan. You son of a bitch. Fine, let out a lull sigh. If you don't want to sell it, that's okay. With that, I was about to leave. He quickly grabbed my hand and said, Okay, 1,000 yuan it is. He sent the photo to me, and I gave him the money. I said, Anyway, it's useless for you to keep it. If you were a journalist, you could make a fortune by exposing these photos. He checked the money transfer and furrowed his brows. His eyes rolled a few times. And he asked me in a low voice, Would journalists really buy this kind of thing? Before, there were journalists who came to my house to buy photos of Vernon being discharged from the hospital. And they offered a good price. Jack lowered his head, clenched his phone tightly. And before I could say anything else, he quickly ran out of the alley. I looked at his back. Vernon, having fulfilled my ansai. When you were being praised highly while stepping on my flesh and blood, did you ever think that one day you would fall and be completely destroyed? For I sent Annie to my best friend's house and then went home with the photo I had just obtained. As soon as I entered the door, I saw Vernon's mother, Ivy, was there. Daphne is back? She took out the steamed pork from her bag while smiling at me and waving. Vernon also smiled and said, Mom cooked a lot of dishes that you and Annie like. None of them are for me. I looked at the dishes in her hand, walked over slowly, and asked softly, Mom, having fulfilled my obsession, do you have any green plums? Her hand froze in midair. But after a moment, she smiled kindly again. No. Do you want to eat green plums? I shook my head and didn't say anything. A few days ago, I saw a post on the WeChat Moments of a neighbor from my hometown. Ivy had bought more than 20 jin of green plums from her. Everyone in the family knew that I liked sour food. In previous years, whenever Ivy bought green plums, she would directly bring them to me. But this year she didn't. So who did she give the green plums to? The image of the woman in a white dress with a slightly bulging belly appeared in my mind. Ivy turned her head, glanced at my eyes, and immediately looked away. Her hands became flustered, and she quickly explained, I originally planned to bring them to you. But the green plums this time were not good. There were a lot of wormholes. I'll bring you some when I buy good ones. Vernon immediately came to smooth things over. We always put you first. People say that I don't look like Mom's son. But you are Mom's real daughter. Ivy laughed heartily. I've always treated Daphne as my own daughter. If you dare to bully her, I won't let you off the hook. What a rare and wonderful mother-in-law. I used to think so too. That's why, in addition to Vernon's high medical expenses over the years, I would also send money to my hometown every month. Ivy would always say no and then say that the money was saved for Annie. However, after Ivy passed away from illness, there was not a single penny left in her account. Where did all that money go? I had never been able to figure this out. But when I was on the verge of death and saw Claire and her son, I understood everything. Verna was disabled and had no financial income. since he had been living with me for years. It was inconvenient for him to support Claire and her son. So it had to be Ivy who did it. She was so eager to have a grandson. No wonder they were mother and son. They were both heartless and shameless. Ivy placed the dishes on the table one by one and then handed me the chopsticks herself. I didn't take them. Vernon nudged me with his elbow and motioned for me to take the chopsticks with his eyes. I still sat there without moving. Ivy looked embarrassed, looking as if she was about to cry. Vernon suddenly changed his expression. He took the chopsticks from Ivy's hand and stuffed them into mine, shouting angrily, "Mom worked so hard to prepare these dishes for you. Don't be ungrateful." I turned my head and looked at him with a smile. Am I being ungrateful like this? Then what do you call it when you have a child with another woman behind my back, and your mom gives all the money I worked so hard to earn to the woman you're having an affair with? Is it ingratitude? Worse than animals? The two of them looked at each other and their faces changed simultaneously. Vernon blinked quickly and tried to cover it up. What are you talking nonsense about? Did someone tell you something? Don't listen to those people outside talking nonsense. I nodded. That's true. But what about this? How do you explain this? I turned on my phone, found the photo I bought from Jack, and showed it to Vernon and Ivy. What a heroic citizen who sacrifices himself for others. Who would have thought that the woman this hero saved from the sea was actually his mistress? Vernon's face turned livid, and his lips couldn't help but tremble. We've been together since we were teenagers. Have I ever done anything to let down you? He lowered his head and didn't dare to look at me. I sneered a few times and continued. You didn't want to burden Claire and your child. But did you ever think about me? Did you ever think about Annie? Why should my daughter and I spend our whole lives protecting the love of you to scoundrels? Who do you think you are? I picked up the steamed pork on the table and threw it hard in his face. Vernon didn't move at all. With oil all over his face, I think fulfilled my say. He didn't seem to feel the pain. He just looked at me quietly, his lips moving as he said, I'm sorry. Ivy let out a scream and immediately wiped her son's face with a loving and distressed expression. She turned around and glared at me. Why can't you talk things out properly? Why do you have to resort to violence? He's your husband. How can you treat him like this? I chuckled. He won't be my husband soon. Vernon quickly grabbed my hand. I'm sorry. It's my fault. Don't leave me. Please. His eyes were full of pleading. But in my mind, all I could think of was the sentence he said to Claire that day. I'm afraid of burdening you and the child. What was there left for me to be nostalgic about this man? I stood up, wiped the tears from my face, and looked down at him. I'll have the custody of Annie. There's still 30. Far you on in savings at home, which I earned. As for those debts, they were all borrowed in your name, and I don't think I have the obligation to pay them off. After my parents died, most of my relatives on my mother's side cut off relations with me. When Vernon suddenly had his accident, his relatives thought that as a woman, I couldn't handle things. No matter how much I begged, they refused to lend me money. In the end, Ivy borrowed the money in Vernon's name. In my previous life, I didn't pay off all the debts until I was 40 years old. And I also developed a lot of illnesses. I died before I was 50. I sacrificed my whole life for a despicable and ridiculous deception. This time, I'm going to live a good life with my daughter. Ivy was also taken aback when she heard about the divorce. But now that she was ready to break up with me, she didn't try to persuade me nicely. Instead, she threatened. Tong Xiao is a disabled person. The court won't agree to the divorce. I looked at his legs and nodded. That's true. But do you think the judge will still not agree if he knows why your precious son became disabled? Vernon finally showed a look of fear. He had a serious hero complex since he was a child and cared a lot about his reputation. Although he was now paralyzed, everyone said he was a hero, and he enjoyed the praise. However, once the fact that he committed adultery with the woman he saved during his marriage was exposed, his pride would be trampled underfoot by everyone in an instant. No. You can't. Vernon's Adam's apple rolled slightly, and he looked at me with a stiff expression. Daphne, we've been together for so many years. Even if I made a small mistake, don't you care about the affection we've had over the years? Are you going to completely ruin me? A small mistake? He actually said it was just a small mistake. I looked at his face. Yes. We had been together for more than 10 years. But now, looking at him, I felt so unfamiliar. If you still want to keep this false reputation, we'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get a divorce tomorrow and then transfer the ownership of the house to her daughter. Tomorrow? Yes. Tomorrow. The nausea and anger in my heart erupted at this moment. I don't want to see you for even a second longer. Just looking at you makes me want to vomit. Vernon seemed to be struck by my words. Looking into my eyes, he said in a hoarse voice, "Okay." I took the documents, packed a few clothes simply, and without looking at them again, I ran out of the door. When I arrived at my best friend's house, she had already prepared the meal and was waiting. Annie seemed to sense something. She ran over and hugged my waist. "Mom, don't abandon me. I'll be very obedient in the future. Don't leave me." Holding back the tears in my eyes, I squatted down, looked into my daughter's eyes, and answered seriously, "Mom will never abandon you. I'm just leaving your dad." She was stunned for a moment. "But," I continued, "Mom will take Annie with me wherever I go. If you miss your dad in the future, you can go back and visit him. I won't ask her who she wants to stay with. No matter how she answers, the result will be the same. I must take my daughter away and will never let her live in that hellhole." The next second, a pair of small hands wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes. "Mom, hadden fulfilled my obsession. Annie will always be with you." 5 After coming out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I looked at the divorce certificate in my hand and felt a little melancholy. After marrying him, I had never thought of getting a divorce. Before Annie was born, he was the only one in my life. All my plans for the rest of my life were closely related to him. I never expected that we would part ways in such a disgraceful way. "Can I still see our daughter again?" Vernon looked at me cautiously and asked in a low voice. I looked down at him and said, "Aren't you going to have a child soon? Why do you still care about Annie?" He lowered his head and didn't say anything more. "Stop pretending to show fatherly love in front of me. When your family was scheming against our mother and daughter, why didn't you think that Annie is your daughter?" Vernon clenched his hands and just whispered an apology. I didn't look at him anymore and turned around to walk to the street to hail a taxi. As I left, I saw Claire trotting up to Vernon. 6 After the divorce, I rented a house with my daughter, which was right next to her school. In fact, my salary wasn't low, and I could definitely give my daughter and me a better life. Annie was at the age of growing rapidly, and the clothes from last year were already too small for her. However, over the past year, I had been so busy running around for Vernon's medical expenses that I had neglected too many things. "Mom, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. I wear my school uniform every day, so there's no need to buy new clothes." Annie looked at the price tag on the clothes with fear and shook her head repeatedly. "No need to buy new ones. No need to buy new ones." I knew she liked little dresses. But in order not to put pressure on me, she wore her school uniform every day, so that I wouldn't notice the cuffs and hems that were too short for her. Wear the school uniform when you go to school, and in your free time, you can wear the clothes you like. Before, Annie's teacher said that she had a great talent for painting and hoped that I would consider signing her up for an interest class. I had already planned to sign her up for the class, and the child was very happy about it. But then Vernon had his accident, and the plan had to be put on hold. In the afternoon, I found the interest class recommended by the teacher and took Annie there. She held my hand tightly and asked, "Mom, what are we doing here?" I stroked her little head and said, "Don't you like painting very much? Mom has signed you up for a class. This way, you can make progress together with other children who like painting. And there will be professional teachers to teach you." "Really?" She was so happy that she almost jumped up. "Of course. You can come to class tomorrow." I seemed to haven't seen the smile on her face like this for a long time. "But Mom, hadn't fulfilled my obsession." She raised her smiling face and looked into my eyes. "I also hope you'll be happy. You know? You haven't smiled for a long time." My heart suddenly skipped a beat. I slowly raised the corners of my mouth, but found that my face was very stiff. I had been living for others for too long. When we were on our way back, my best friend Sally drove over. As expected, there were a lot of things in the trunk, including food, daily necessities, and even stationery for Annie. I should have gone with you when you got divorced and given that scumbag a good beating. Sally took a bite of the skewer, took a sip of beer, and cursed angrily. I quickly glanced at Annie's room to make sure the door was closed. Sally was already a bit drunk. She slapped the table hard and said, "On the day you got divorced. He got a marriage certificate with that bitch Claire. Trash. Both of them are trash." I wasn't angry. Nor was I surprised. Vernon couldn't even get on the bed or go to the toilet by himself now. Even with his mother there. Didn't Ivy need to go out to work? They didn't have any savings. But they had a lot of debts. "Aren't you angry?" I shook my head and said, "Their lives will become more and more miserable, while my life is just beginning. Why should I be angry because of them?" These were my sincere words. It should be soon that the photos in Jack's phone would be made public. 7. The life of my daughter, and I was ordinary and comfortable. She became more and more lively and made a lot of new friends. Every day, she would chatter like a little talkative person and tell me the interesting things that happened at school. I could feel that because of my choice, she had changed a lot. Our lives were all moving in a direction that was completely opposite to that of our previous lives. And this was what I valued the most. 2 months later, the affair between Vernon and Claire was indeed exposed. Before this matter became a trending topic on the internet, Ivy was still playing the victim online, saying things like her daughter-in-law ran away because she disliked her son being disabled, and her granddaughter was now taught by her ex-daughter-in-law ought to recognize her own father. And she gained a lot of sympathy. Because of this wave of sympathy, Vernon received some financial support from some members of the public and the government. Just when they thought their life was going to get better, this scandal shattered their dreams like a bolt from the blue. After watching the exposed video, I realized that what Jack showed me that day wasn't all of it. There were even more vivid videos. In the video, Vernon and Claire were discussing where they would settle down after getting a divorce from me. Jack was also in this video, crying and complaining about how much damage Claire's infidelity had caused him. I had always been curious about why they fell into the water at the beach. Fortunately, the reporter asked Jack the question that I had in mind. Jack snorted and said, "Vernon was hesitant to get a divorce. And Claire was pregnant. So she threatened to commit suicide. So that was the reason." I looked at my phone and couldn't come back to my senses for a long time. Only at this moment did I confirm that the hero I liked when I was young was already dead. 8. Vernon was suddenly pushed to the center of public attention. And even Claire was exposed by netizens through digging up personal information online. Vernon had received a lot of help from the neighbors before, but now everyone was condemning him. There was no financial support for the family anymore. So Claire had to go out to work. She was already 7 months pregnant at this time and had to squeeze onto the bus every day with her big belly. Once we met on the street, and she was handing out flyers. She only had a junior high school education and had been a housewife for many years. Now, with her big belly, no one dared to sign a long-term contract with her. She also saw me and quickly lowered her head, but when she turned around, she bumped into a passerby and was splashed with hot coffee all over her body. The passerby didn't show any understanding just because she was a pregnant woman and immediately started cursing. Claire didn't dare to talk back and could only keep apologizing. I didn't feel sorry for her because in my previous life, it was me who lived such a life. And she and her son would take a part of my hard-earned money every month. When I got home, Annie was sitting downstairs. "Why are you sitting here? Didn't you bring your key when you went downstairs?" She shook her head and pointed upstairs with her little finger. "Dad is here." I wasn't surprised. Over the past 6 months, Annie had asked to go and see her father several times. However, Ivy had refused her every time. She almost commanded Annie in an authoritarian tone, "Don't go and disturb your father's new life." Vernon had never taken the initiative to call Annie either. "Let's go home. Mom will make your favorite braised prawns in oil for you today." The child's mood improved a bit. However, I didn't expect that Vernon would actually be sitting in my bedroom waiting for me. When I went in, His hand was still on my pillow. "What are you doing?" He was startled. And awkwardly withdrew his hand and explained. I thought this was our daughter's room. Does this look like a child's room? My pajamas that I changed in the morning were still on the bed. It was too far-fetched to say that he mistook the room. Vernon looked up at me, his eyes slightly red, and said, "Do you hate me so much? I just miss you so much and want to be closer to you." He quickly pushed his wheelchair to my side and tried to hold my hand. But I dodged it. "Daphne. I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I'm sorry." He cried and explained. "I was seduced by that bitch Claire. It's easy for a woman to chase a man. I didn't want to. But she had too many tricks." I looked at him, extremely disappointed. "I'd rather you say that you just changed your heart and fell in love with Claire. Maybe it's because she was beaten by her husband for years. Because she was pitiful. Or because she was beautiful. Whatever the reason, you just fell in love with her. At least, you have the courage to admit your mistake. At least it makes me feel that I didn't love the wrong person in the past. But now, you're pushing all the blame onto a pregnant woman. You really make me sick." Perhaps he didn't expect me to expose his hypocritical lies face to face. And his face turned red instantly. "No. I didn't say that to shirk my responsibility. I just want to tell you that I love you. The person I love has always been you." "Really? You? So what?" I interrupted him. "When did you realize that you've always loved me? Was it when Claire couldn't find a high-paying job to support you and your mother? Or was it when you were being condemned by everyone and she couldn't help you at all?" Vernon rolled his eyes, lowered his head, and when he looked up again, his face was covered with tears. "I just want our family to live like we used to. I know you hate me. But after all, I'm Annie's biological father. How can you bear to let the child grow up in a single-parent family? Even for the sake of the child. Won't you give me a chance?" Just as I was about to speak, the bedroom door was pushed open, and Annie walked in and stood beside me. She said to Vernon calmly, "Dad, if you loved me, you wouldn't have cheated. Wouldn't have a baby with another aunt, and wouldn't use me to threaten Mom." My heart was shocked. I tried my best to keep the child away from the adult matters, just not wanting her to be involved in too much right and wrong. Unexpectedly, she actually knew everything. Annie raised her hand to wipe the tears on Vernon's face, and her tone was still calm. "Dad, although I live with Mom, she gives all her love to me. I've never been unhappy for a moment because of your lack of company." After saying that, she took my hand and gently scratched the palm of my hand with her little finger. "I hope you won't come to disturb Mom and me anymore. You've already caused Mom enough harm. Don't make me hate you. Okay?" Vernon looked into Annie's eyes and didn't speak for a long time. I don't know how long it took before he sighed. "I still don't know you and our daughter well enough. I thought." I interrupted him and sneered. "You thought we were both so weak that we would just follow you home obediently with just a few words from you. Right?" He shook his head. But I knew that's exactly what he thought in his heart. He sighed again, pushed his wheelchair and left. His back was lonely and desolate. Only then did I realize that he had lost a lot of weight. He was still wearing the trench coat I bought for him last year, looking like he was wearing an adult's clothes that didn't fit him. Annie and I stayed in the bedroom and didn't go out to see him off. "You said you were going to find a job. But you actually came to see your ex-wife?" A roar filled with grievance and anger rang out in the quiet corridor. Annie and I walked out and, as expected, saw Claire standing at the door, holding her belly. She was already 8 months pregnant, looking like a strange puppet. Her limbs were slender, making her belly look alarmingly large in contrast. Vernon glanced at Annie and then, with a cold face, scolded Claire. "Don't make a scene here. Go home." Claire tried to rush in, but was blocked firmly by Vernon's wheelchair. "You're protecting them? How did you promise me before?" Vernon reached out and grabbed her wrist, trying to push her out, but Claire took the opportunity to try to squeeze in. In a hurry, Vernon actually knocked Claire down to the ground with his wheelchair. It hurt so much. My belly. I rushed forward. She was already pale-faced and sweating profusely from the pain. Vernon stared blankly at everything in front of him. "Quick, what cat?" call 120. Hearing my shout, he then belatedly took out his phone and made the call. After both of them were taken away by the ambulance, Annie and I looked at each other and let out a sigh of relief. Mom, will that Auntie's baby be okay? At dinner, Annie asked. I shook my head. Mom doesn't know either. It should be okay. After all, medicine is so advanced nowadays. I didn't find out until a few days later that both Claire and her baby were safe. However, Claire had injured her body. Even though the baby was already 100 days old, her illness still hadn't recovered. Ivy finally shed her image as the kind and amiable mother-in-law and forced Claire, a sick person, to go out and find a job. But even though Claire worked as hard as she could, the money she earned was only enough to support herself and the child. Finally, Hetty fulfilled me one day, as if she had suddenly seen the light. She held the baby and wanted to divorce Vernon. Unfortunately, hadn't fulfilled, just as Ivy had said, given Vernon's situation, the court wouldn't easily grant the divorce. When I saw her again, she had been tortured beyond recognition by Vernon and his mother. She probably had no one else to talk to, so she held me and chattered on for a long time. Is it only you who's making money in Vernon's family now? She nodded. Then, whatever, sorry. Shouldn't you have the final say in Vernon's family? She stopped crying and stared at me blankly. I stood up and didn't look at her as I left. After Claire went home, she stopped giving Vernon any money for his treatment. So Ivy had to go back home and work hard in the fields to earn money for her son's medical expenses. But she was old. And soon she fell ill. Vernon was tortured by his illness and looked like a shadow of his former self. He pleaded with his wife to treat him. But by then, Claire had long since lost all affection for him and just wanted to live a good life with her son. A few years later, Vernon finally died of illness at home. Sally couldn't wait to see Vernon's pitiful state with her own eyes. She made inquiries everywhere and now described it vividly. I heard that his skin was all rotten, and there were signs of being beaten. Some people also said that in fact, he was starved to death. As for whether these were true or not, Vernon had already been cremated, and the truth could no longer be known. When Ivy heard the news, she couldn't catch her breath and died in the field. By the time she was discovered, her body had already started to stink. Claire got her freedom and left here with her son. Before leaving, she came to see me. You're still so beautiful, she said, looking at my face with a hint of envy. No, I should say you're even more beautiful than before. I'm sorry. As she spoke, she suddenly apologized. Then, let out a sigh. Before I could say anything, she grabbed her son's hand and left. She was only 40 years old, but she was already hunched over and looked very old. I felt a bit sad, looking at her. It was as if I was seeing myself in my previous life. Jack wanted to find Claire and actually came to me. Just by looking at the injuries on his face and his anxious expression, I knew he had lost another bet. Do you think I would know where she went? Even if I did know, why would I tell someone like him? He gave me a fierce glare and then ran away. A few days later, I'd heard that Jack had driven under the influence and his car had plunged into the sea, and he had drowned. Surprisingly, I actually felt relieved for Claire. Soon, let out a long sigh. Annie graduated from her senior year of high school. She chose the major she liked and went to the city she liked. As for me, I chat about gossip with Sally every day, go shopping, and occasionally go on trips. This time, both my daughter and I have become better and happier versions of ourselves. The end.